The thing that frightened Devore and Kessler most was not that it followed him. It's that it had already been there, waiting, before he ever arrived. He had hiked 847 miles of the Appalachian Trail by the time he reached Nantahala National Forest in the third week of October 2019. Not consecutively. He wasn't a through hiker, not yet, but section by section, beginning from Springer Mountain in 2014, working north through Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, accumulating the trail's long body the way some men accumulate debts, quietly, over years, with a certain pleasure in the slow accrual. He was 41 years old. He worked as a civil structural engineer for a firm in Knoxville. He had logged enough backcountry miles to recognize the difference between unease born from fatigue and unease born from something else entirely. His partner for this section was a woman named Thessaly Brandt, 44, a biology instructor at a community college in Asheville, who had been hiking the AT in sections since her late 20s. They had met through a shared forum, corresponded for 2 years, and completed 2 previous trips together, once in the Smokies, once through the Rhone Highlands, without incident or awkwardness. They were comfortable with each other in the practical way that trail partners become comfortable. They had seen each other cold and blistered, shared the logistics of bear canisters and wet boots and camp dinners that smelled better than they tasted. Thessaly was methodical about gear. She kept a detailed, handwritten journal. She identified flora by Latin name without effort. She was not the kind of person who invented problems. They entered the Nantahala section on a Tuesday, October 15th, from the Wesser Creek trailhead off US 74, intending a 4-day loop south along the AT to Rufus Morgan Shelter, then west via the Kimsey Creek Trail, totaling approximately 23 miles. The forecast called for clear skies the first 2 days, and possible light rain on the third. Everything was ordinary, to the point of being unremarkable, and Devore would later think about that specifically, how aggressively normal everything had been at the start, as if curated for contrast. The first day passed without event. The trail climbed steadily through hardwood forest, the October understory stripped to amber and rust, light coming through in long diagonal shafts. They made 9.4 miles and camped above a tributary of Wesser Creek with a fire that burned to coals by 9. Thessaly wrote in her journal. They were asleep by 10. The first anomaly occurred on the morning of the second day, and Devore would not recognize it as an anomaly until much later. They had broken camp by 7:30. Around 9 o'clock, Thessaly stopped on the trail ahead of him and stood very still. He came up beside her and followed her gaze into the trees. There was a man standing about 60 feet off the trail, still facing them. Brown jacket, dark trousers, at a distance where facial features were indistinct. He didn't move. Devore raised a hand in greeting. The figure raised its right hand, a precise mirror of his gesture. "Hello," Thessaly called. No response. The figure remained still. "Probably a day hiker who went off for a bathroom break," Devore said. Thessaly said nothing for a moment. Then, "Yeah." They continued south. He glanced back twice. Both times, the figure was in exactly the same position, facing the trail. They reached Rufus Morgan Shelter by early afternoon, signed the register, previous entries 2 weeks old, and ate lunch on the bench. Devore noticed that Thessaly's handwriting in the register looked slightly different from her journal handwriting, more compressed, and he thought nothing of it. The second anomaly came that evening. They had camped 200 yards past the shelter, under a stand of tulip poplars. Devore was filtering water from a stream about 30 feet from camp when he heard Thessaly speak. Something he couldn't quite make out over the water. He said, "What?" She didn't respond. He walked back. Thessaly was sitting on a log, writing in her journal. "What did you say?" he asked. "I didn't say anything. I heard you, while I was at the stream. I've been writing since you left." She held up the journal. The page was half filled. He looked at the handwriting and felt a small tremor. The letters looked different, wider, more rounded. He thought, "I'm tired." He ate dinner. The tremor faded. That night, around 2 in the morning, he woke for no reason and lay listening. The forest was completely silent. Not the ordinary nighttime silence, where insects and small animals provide a continuous low register of sound, but a total silence, the kind that has physical weight. He lay still for what felt like 4 minutes. Then a screech owl called from somewhere to the north, and the ordinary sounds resumed. He did not look at the tent wall to see if there was a shadow where Thessaly lay. He would think about that later. Why he hadn't looked. The third day was when something shifted. Over breakfast, he spread the map on his knee and reviewed the route. Thessaly was packing her bag. He said they should hit the Kimsey Creek Junction by noon at yesterday's pace. She agreed. Everything she said was correct. Everything she said was appropriate. But Dvorin became aware, gradually, over the morning's hiking, of a quality to her responses that he struggled to name. It was precise. She never initiated. In 3 hours of intermittent conversation, Thessaly had not once introduced a new subject. She had responded, agreed, affirmed, but she had not once said something he hadn't first prompted. He noticed this the way you notice a slight syncopation in music, and did not immediately understand why it mattered. Around 11 o'clock, on a long uphill stretch, he stopped and waited for her. He said nothing. She stood beside him, looking at the trail ahead, breathing evenly. 10 seconds. 15. She did not speak. He noticed that her breathing had the same rhythm as his. Not approximately, but exactly. Expiration for expiration. A synchrony so precise it had the quality of a trick. He looked away and changed his breathing deliberately, lengthening his exhale. After a moment, hers changed too. "Do you remember what you had for breakfast the first morning we hiked together?" he asked. "The Smokies trip, 3 years ago." A pause that was a fraction too long. "Oatmeal, with those dried cranberries I always bring." He remembered. It was correct. "What did I have?" Another pause, slightly longer. "You had the same." He hadn't. He had eaten a tortilla with peanut butter because he had forgotten oatmeal and been embarrassed about it, and Thessaly had laughed, and he had laughed too. One of the small, specific memories that accumulate between people who have shared time outdoors. He said, "Right," and started walking. There is a kind of fear that is entirely cognitive, not visceral. It lives in the mind only, a cold, conceptual dread, worse than the physical kind because the body cannot metabolize it. It cannot be run off or breathed through. It simply exists as a recognition, and must be carried forward, step by step, mile by mile, for as long as the trail continues. He thought about the figure in the trees, the voice at the stream, the silence at 2 in the morning, and the fact that he had not looked at the tent wall. Around 1 in the afternoon they reached an exposed ridgeline, the trees thinning to a view west across the Nantahala Gorge, the river a pale thread far below. He stopped and turned to face her. She stopped 3 feet away, exactly. She was looking at the view. "When did we first meet?" "In person." "What was the date?" The wind moved her hair across her face, and she reached up and moved it back. A gesture he had seen Thessaly make. The same hand, the same motion. "May," she said. "May of 2017. "What day?" A pause. "The 11th. He could not verify this. He stood on the ridge and understood that he had no way of testing her that she could not pass simply by being approximately correct, either because she was Thessaly, with normal human imprecision, or because whatever she was had access to information that was almost complete, but not complete. He could not tell the difference by asking questions. He said, "I'm going to push ahead to the Kimsey Creek Junction." She said, "Of course." No objection. No curiosity about why. He walked very fast. He has told this part consistently. He did not run. Some instinct told him that running would change something, that the quality of his movement mattered. He covered the next 1.5 miles in just under 30 minutes. He did not look back. After 9 minutes at the junction, he checked his watch. Thessaly came around the bend, walking at her normal pace, not hurrying. She reached him and said, "I like when you push the pace. It's good for me." The smile was correct. He said nothing. That evening she wrote in her journal for 40 minutes. He watched her pen move across the page with complete fluency, no hesitation. He thought, that is what someone looks like when they are writing things they actually remember. He thought, or it is what something looks like when it has learned to perform that. In the morning, she made oatmeal with dried cranberries and offered him some. She talked about a bird she had seen on the descent to the creek, a late-migrating black-throated blue warbler, unusual for October at this elevation. She described it precisely: the clean slate blue of the male's back, the white wing patch, the dark throat. He had seen the bird too. He said, "I saw that too." She said, "I know. You pointed it out." He hadn't. He had watched it alone. He was certain he hadn't spoken. They reached the Wesser Creek trailhead by 11. He loaded both packs. Thessaly got into the passenger seat. He sat with the key in his hand. He said, "Thessaly, when I was a child, I was afraid of one specific thing. I've mentioned it before. Do you remember what it was?" He had never told Thessaly this. He had told no one. It was not something he had put into words, even to himself, in many years. She looked at him. Something moved behind her eyes. Not calculation, but something closer to recognition. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't know. You've never told me." He started the truck. He drove north on US 74. Neither of them spoke for 11 miles. He became aware gradually of a smell. Not unpleasant, simply wrong for the context. The dense mineral smell of creek water, of wet stone, of deep groundwater, as if the interior held something that had never fully dried. He opened his window a half-inch. The smell remained. At Bryson City, he stopped for gas. He went inside. He stood at the counter, looking back through the window at the truck, at the profile of the woman in the passenger seat, looking straight ahead at the road. He drove to Asheville. He dropped her at her car in the Food Lion lot on Merriman Avenue. She took her pack from the bed and said, "Same time next year?" He said, "Yeah." She drove away. He called the real Thessaly Brandt 4 days later. She answered on the second ring. She had sent him 3 messages the night before the trip. Food poisoning, she said. She was sorry for the late notice. He had never received them. There were no messages on his phone. He does not hike in the Nantahala anymore. He has not looked at the 3 photographs he took over those 4 days. He has never repeated what the real Thessaly said when he described the woman who had hiked with him. Only that she went quiet before she spoke, and that what she said made him pull over to the side of the road. There is no name for what walked beside him for 4 days. No category that contains it. No account that adequately describes the behavior of something that listens this carefully, mirrors this precisely, that only becomes visible in a single unguarded moment. A gas station window. A profile that does not move, that does not grow impatient, that simply waits. It never threatened him. It walked beside him and breathed when he breathed, and wrote in a journal, and identified birds, and sat smelling of cold, deep water, and asked how far to Asheville. He has thought many times about what it was interested in. He does not arrive at any answer that is less frightening than the last. Devoren Kessler turned 47 last March. He still hikes the AT alone. He has a system for verifying at intervals that he is still alone. He will not describe it. He only says it works by asking for something that cannot be learned from observation, something that exists only inside a specific mind, from the beginning. He says it has worked so far. He says, so far. If this account left you with a question you can't set down, you already know what to do. Like the video and subscribe before something that isn't you does it instead.